Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, brothers and sisters, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this launch, this media launch of my new book, The Pan-African Love Story of Arnold and Mignon Ford. I had to say good afternoon, good morning, because I'm aware that we are live streaming this event, and it is going out literally all around the world. Here in Barbados, right across the Caribbean, Ethiopia, the United States of America, Canada, the UK, indeed all across the Pan-African diaspora, they're hearing us live and direct at this time. I would like to extend a very, very special welcome to a lady by the name of Miss Mignon Ford, who is no doubt tuned in to this live stream right now. Mignon is the granddaughter of Arnold and Mignon Ford, the daughter of Professor Abby Ford, who unfortunately passed in 2018. And indeed, it is to Professor Abby Ford that I dedicated this book. As I say in the dedication section, this book is dedicated to the memory of Professors Cecil Crawford and Abby Ford, both of whom committed themselves to honoring the legacies of Arnold Josiah Ford and Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford, and to telling the story of their inspirational lives. Well, brothers and sisters, we have a packed but concise program for you. But before we go any further into the program, we want to present to you a musical composition of Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford. It is easily his most famous composition. Some of us believe that it is perhaps the single most important song in the history of modern black music. It was the anthem of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And at a time when there were very few black independent countries, the UNIA declared that this song was the national anthem, the anthem of the entire black race. So this song became extremely important. It was sung all over the black world, wherever serious and committed black men and women came together to deal with the business of their people. Their meetings invariably began with a rendition of the Universal Ethiopian Anthem. And to perform the anthem for us here this evening, we have none other than David Comissiong on violin and Khalid Batson on guitar. Brothers and sisters, the Universal Ethiopian Anthem.
Rendition of the Universal Ethiopian Anthem. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so beautiful and moving. Ethiopia, thou land of our fathers, thou land where the gods love to be. A storm cloud at night sudden gathers, our armies come rushing to thee. What powerful, powerful words. Brothers and sisters, I first learned about Arnold and Mignon Ford way back in the early 80s. And from the time I heard about these life stories, they really struck a chord with me. I was so inspired by what I had heard, and I knew that someday I had to produce a book that would help to tell these stories, would help to bring these two heroes to the greater attention of our people. I have called the book The Pan-African Love Story of Arnold and Mignon Ford. And it is really a Pan-African love story. On one level, it is the story of the love between this man, this Barbadian, Caribbean man, African man, and this Barbadian, Caribbean, African woman. But it is also a love story, a story of love of Africa, of the African people of Ethiopia. And I was very fortunate when I wrote this book that I was able to get the contribution of Queen Mother Dr. Myrna Belgrave to contribute the foreword to this book, because not only did Myrna know Professor Abbey Ford extremely well, Minnie Abbey Ford quite well, but she had visited Ethiopia. And there was no one better equipped to express the essence of that love that Arnold and Mignon had, not only for each other, but for Africa, for Ethiopia, for the mystique and majesty of their people. And so I would now like to invite Queen Mother Dr. Myrna Belgrave. She is a veteran Pan-Africanist, a veteran educator, a veteran cultural administrator. She is a woman of many, many hats, dearly beloved here in Barbados, in the Pan-African community, but she has served not only in Barbados, but she has served our people right across the Caribbean, in North America, and on the continent of Africa itself. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Queen Mother Dr. Myrna Belgrave to address you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, David, for that kind of introduction. Sometimes I feel that I wasn't there. Okay, it is my honor to do this critique, perhaps you would call it, but you can give it a name and I'm finished. It is the Pan-African love story. I love the cover, love it so much. It is a narrative of love on many levels. It represents a love for ancestral history, a love for an empowering religion, a love for music, culture, country, and contribution. And most of all, it is a narrative of love for the self. Of course, with the added benefits of love for partner and family. It is an account of our own Barbadian son and daughter, Arnold Josiah Ford and Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford. It is a focus particularly on the personal journey within the historic development of Arnold as an African in the diaspora, and that of his beloved Mignon, who was committed to similar ideals and who was as courageous, creative, and resilient as he was. I personally identify Arnold as a seeker of truth, and Mignon as a lover of seekers of truth. Truth seekers travel far and wide. They search everywhere. Arnold migrated to the United States and began his journey through the Black world and interacted with the principles and ideologies of groups within the Harlem Renaissance and the New Negro movement. Sometimes they're called this by the same name. And he was joining all the groups. He joined with Marcus Garvey and the UNIA and all the other black movements with all their outreach and connections. He learned in this setting about his history, more about his history, and he fell in love with the conscious community and family that this consciousness from history was creating. It was in this awakened culture that he met and fell in love with Mignon and started his own personal family, producing 2 sons, Yusuf and Abi. His love for music and his cultural expressions also blossomed during this period. An acceptance and love for one's ancestral history is a powerful force that compels one to become a seeker of a truth that is dormant within the being. That type of search did that for Arnold Josiah Joseph. His family lore contained the notion that his family descended from an ancient priestly Israeli clan. His migration to the United States widened his understanding of his historical roots, as well as his opportunities. And although he was baptized as a Methodist in Barbados, he encountered, identified with, and embraced the religious pathway called by many names, such as Ethiopian Hebrews, Black Jews, the Lost Tribe, the Beta Israel, and we know commonly it is called the Falashes. He began studying the Hebrew language and the religion, and ultimately secured an ordination as a rabbi. He became known as Rabbi Arnold Ford. We are seeing in the book that a love for religious pathway, a pathway that connects with history, that empowers one's identity, This connection, this religious pathway, can lead and compel one to reject all the labels, philosophies, dogmas, beliefs, doctrines, and the lifestyles that chain the mind and intellect, that keep the mind in victim consciousness, that suppress the deep truths within the soul, and fragment and weaken the spirit. Arnold found his own empowering religious pathway, the Hebrew religion, and he migrated again, this time to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, as you have heard, is a land that can easily capture one's love, can easily restore a dignity that has become trapped, almost lost in colonialism and enslavement. Ethiopia itself has never been captured. It has never been under foreign domination. I have spoken glowingly about my visit to this mystical land in the foreword of the book. And I can understand how it attracted and held the interest of both the rabbi and Mignon. I was myself enthralled by its quiet roots in antiquity and its historic sights and ambience. I still have Aksum, one of the cities in Ethiopia, as one of my favorite meditation sites. Rabbi Ford penned the experience when he wrote, "Ethiopia, thou land of our fathers, thou land where the gods love to be." That is Ethiopia, magical, spiritual, historical. He created the music in these lyrics, which we sing at most Pan-African gatherings. We call it the Pan-African National Anthem, and it is very inspiring. The Fords fell so deeply in love with the country Ethiopia that when it was undergoing many hardships from the invading Italians, the rabbi on his deathbed made his wife promise not to leave the country after his death. Mignon, the one who also fell in love with the country, remained, and she started a school that made a significant contribution to the development of Ethiopian young girls. I had the wonderful opportunity to visit the school site and heard its history and its contribution when I was there, and my heart pumped with Bajan pride. As an educator myself, I really sincerely salute her vision, her resilience, and her contribution. It takes a lot to do that. So we are saying in the book that love for self, love for a religion that allows for authentic connection to a God that has embraced your historical identity. We can see love for history, love for her, the rabbi's partner, love for Ethiopia, and love for contribution inspired this rabbi. And this combination of things, this combination of love on all of these levels, all aligned and created the opportunity for a significant contribution to the Ethiopian community. And we salute him for this as well. Such love produces a narrative that is fit for scripting a book, even for stage or screen, fit for inspiring and giving good connections to one's ancestral history and one's countrymen. The author, Ambassador David Comissiong, has woven these levels of love into this narrative, the Pan-African love story. It is detailed, rich, informative, engaging, filled with graphics, well-researched, and the narrative invokes a lasting pride within the reader as we follow the journey of one of our Barbadian son and daughter. Indeed, it is a love story for all ages, young and old, for all time, past, present, and future. It shares a special inspiration with the Africans in the diaspora, and we all are Pan-Africanists, by the way, whether we accept it or not. It is an inspiration that strengthens our love for our ancestry as we courageously continue to dive deeply into our past rich history, as we continue to reconnect and embrace our own authentic resonance. Authentic resonance, and that's important. It must resonate inside of us, and it's there waiting to be resonated. And it is from this resonance that we find fulfillment. Such dives build an awareness and power that make possible the creation of meaningful historic narratives as legacies of courage, tenacity, self-sovereignty, and contribution. Abbey Ford honored that possibility. David valued and recorded that possibility. And I consider it an honor to have been asked to write the foreword for the book and to give this presentation. David, I congratulate you in seeing the value in sharing this episode, this slice of Pan-African history, and I recommend the book highly and widely to everyone, and I hope our youngsters will have a chance to dig into it and make their lives a unique narrative so that it can be recorded for all time. I thank you.
Thank you, Sister Myrna. Our sister mentioned the cover of the book. This beautiful cover was designed by the artists at a black printry in Barbados named Panagraphics. In fact, they printed the book. The cover, I gave them the concept, what I wanted, but they produced the design, and it is really a very beautiful cover. It features 7 personalities on the cover. Empress Menen, Emperor Haile Selassie I, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Bishop Wentworth Matthew, one of the pioneers of the Black Jewish movement, Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, former Prime Minister of Barbados, national hero of Barbados, and a young Arnold, a young Rabbi Arnold Ford, and a young Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford. And there's one historical personality who really should have been on the cover, and that is the African-American musician James Reese Europe. The back cover tells you a little bit about what the book is all about, and I'll just read that quickly. This is what the back cover says. In this thrilling narrative, the reader is introduced to Arnold Josiah Ford, giant of black music, legendary black Jewish rabbi, stalwart of the Marcus Garvey movement, heroic back to Africa pioneer, and to Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford, a courageous freedom fighter and a titan of educational reform and development in the African nation of Ethiopia. Experience the love journey that took Arnold and Mignon from the Caribbean island of Barbados to the black Mecca of 1920s Harlem in the United States, and thence onward to the Empire of Ethiopia. Journey with them as Arnold collaborates with James Reese Europe to lay the foundation of black classical music, with Marcus Garvey to develop the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and with Bishop Wentworth Matthew to spread the black Jewish faith. Accompany them to the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I in Ethiopia, and witness how they both stand firm against the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, and how Mignon goes on to help rebuild Ethiopia with her phenomenal Princess Zenebi Walk School. The Pan-African love story of Arnold and Mignon Ford is chock-a-block with inspirational historical information that is critical to the fostering of progressive black consciousness and to the development of a strong sense of black or Pan-African identity, end of quote. And brothers and sisters, that really is what this book is all about. And that is what inspired the writing of this book. We have to give our people their history. Unfortunately, many of our people do not know who they really are, what their real capacities are, because they have a distorted view of their history. They have a distorted view of the journey and the achievements of their forefathers and foremothers. And those of us who know the true story, we have a duty to share that story. We are a remarkable people. We are a people who, we Caribbean people in Haiti, we, fresh out of enslavement, defeated the greatest armies of Europe, the armies of France, Britain, and Spain. We built the citadel in Haiti, a wonder of early 19th century architecture and engineering, just out of slavery. We in Barbados planned the massive Bussa slave rebellion. We, in the mid-17th century, although they called our people slaves, it was us, it was our ancestors who were running the first industrial enterprises of the European Industrial Revolution. The integrated sugar plantation with the windmill and the sugar factory. They said our people were slaves, but these enslaved Africans on that plantation were blacksmiths, carpenters, coopers, boilers, carrying out the technical and industrial processes upon which the wealth and the power of modern European societies were built. Arnold Josiah Ford was born in 1877. 1877, a mere 39 years after the abolition of slavery in Barbados. Yet, Arnold Josiah Ford, in that racist colonial society, develops into a master musician, a master of the violin, the acoustic bass, and the harp. And at the age of 22, enlists in the British Royal Navy as a master musician. Tremendous natural ability and capacity. I will speak at greater length towards the end of our program, and I will share more information about the lives of Arnold and Mignon Ford. But suffice it to say, these two Barbadians, this Caribbean man and Caribbean women, they were right there. They played critical roles in the development, in the Harlem Renaissance, the development of the music of Black America, jazz, the spirituals, concert music of Black America. They played critical roles in the development of the Marcus Garvey movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, critical roles in the development of the Black Jewish faith, founding the Commandment Keepers Temple in Harlem with Bishop Wentworth Matthews, going on to Ethiopia to the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I, contributing to the coronation, writing an anthem, composing an anthem in honor of Emperor Haile Selassie, standing firm when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, and going on to play a role in the rebuilding of that African country. This is what this book is all about. It is 97 pages, a small volume, but it is chock-a-block with historical information and analysis. And the text is illustrated with some approximately 80 photographs. The book was consciously designed for a mass audience. This book is written for our people. This book is written for teenagers, for young adults, for mature people. It is written for the entire population. It is giving our people an extremely important component of their history. And I will have a little bit more to say later on, but at this point, I want to bring to you a Barbadian artist who, like me, was inspired by this story from when he first heard it. And he has gone on to produce several paintings depicting Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, the master musician. I speak of the artist known as, that we all know as Guru, christened David McLean, one of our most outstanding Barbadian artists. He has a surrealist style of painting, very highly trained. I know he went to Senegal, the art biennial in Senegal, and got great inspiration from that sojourn to the African continent. But this is a brother who does tremendous work in the field of art here in Barbados. And if you look behind me, you will see on display two of his paintings of Arnold Josiah Ford, master musician. Brothers and sisters, I give you David McLean, also known as Guru.
Such a pleasant good evening to my brothers and my sisters right here in Barbados and right across the world, right across our Pan-African world, right across our diaspora. I want to begin very simply with a smile by thanking His Excellency David Comissiong, not only for writing this book, but having the courage to salvage such an important Pan-Africanist, probably the most single-handedly important Pan-Africanist in our modern Pan-African history. And I want to start with this smile because of Dr. Marion's Belgrave, what she spoke about, this great love story. So my smile comes like a Barbadian. I was first introduced to Rabbi J. Arnold Ford in 1984 while doing some research for a project called Black Iconic Figures. And I was, I was looking at the connections of Barbados and the wider diasporic movements, Shirley Chisholm. We looked at King Jaja's visit and his sojourn in Barbados. And we was also looking at Prince Hall, who is also a Barbadian, one of the first Masonic lodges on the planet. But when I came to Josiah Arnold Ford and his wife Mignon, born right here in Barbados, I definitely could not believe the story. So I want to begin very simply by saying that the Rastafarian community itself must be very grateful for Mignon and Arnold, because it was, Garvey spoke of Africanism and Pan-Africanism, and he spoke of Africa for Africans. But it was actually Rabbi J. Arnold Ford who took those first pioneers to Ethiopia. And that was in 1930. He wanted to reach for the events of the enthronement of His Imperial Majesty and his wife on the 2nd of November, 1930. But the travels on his ship probably delayed such, and he arrived in Ethiopia in December. But he was still there for all the celebrations. But what really had me is that when I'm mentioning the Rastafarian community and the gratefulness that we all should show, is that when we speak of Garvey, we have to speak on a parallel level as to this same gentleman who actually wrote the charter for the UNA, the United Negroes Improvement Association of Marcus Messiah Garvey. As Comissiong said before, he was also one of the men to start out the first Jewish movement in the United States of America. But beyond that, it was his enterprising and Pan-African's ways, because he actually went toe-to-toe with Marcus Messiah Garvey. And there's a great quote by Professor Tony Martin, when Garvey said that when he was afflicted and when he was being arrested for the nefarious charges that they brought against him, out of the whole nation of the UNIA, which had branches all over the world, including Barbados, it was Rabbi J. Arnold Ford, who he said had never betrayed him, had never left him alone. It was Rabbi J. Arnold Ford that the United States government kept banging on his door for him to come to court to witness against Garvey. And he never, ever, ever budged. Actually, he wrote a song to enlighten us about the greatness of Marcus Messiah Garvey. I want to introduce myself as a global Afrocentric artist. And what I naturally do is salvage all of those stories and all of those events of our own history, which our ordinary Barbadian people know nothing at all about. If you talk to 10 people in Broad Street today or any part of Barbados, and you ask them about Rabbi J. Arnold Ford or Megan Ford, they might ask you, to whom are you speaking about? Here is one of the most important couples, not one single man, but his wife also, who went up to all the tribulations of the Ethiopian war. She was even put out of the school. She had to leave the premises. So anybody can imagine the horrors, the indignity that this lady suffered. Starting a small little school at her residence with about 5 or 6 tables. And there she was, and there the emperor himself and his wife, Mignon, they were so impressed by these 2 Barbadians that came on board and single-handedly raised the standard of education in a new Ethiopia. It must be applauded. This is so important. And when we begin to think about Pan-Africanism, we have to come on board. We have to realize that this man was born right here in Barbados. So I was so moved by this story that I began my own love story for Arnold Ford and his wife Mignon. And I produced at least 5 paintings, and they're in some very substantial and international prestigious collections. This one on the left is actually in the collection of Anderson Topping. That's the gentleman who owned the conglomerate of Sewing World. And this is a very important painting. This one, we want to travel it through the Caribbean. It's only about 10 months old, but when I was doing it, I want Barbados to feel very pleased, as I am pleased now, that Dr. Marion Belgrave traveled all the way from the United States of America to visit me at my humble studio, and I am the first and only Barbadian person besides Abi Mani, his granddaughter, who, yes, Minnie Abby, who is the recipient of the Marion Arnold Ford Foundation Fund. And I am so pleased. And I thank you again, and I thank the international organization for recognizing my work. I don't want to bore you so much, but what I would like everybody here to do is to pick up this book. It is a very small volume, but I want to tell you, I've been reading from 14 years old. It bridges the gap. And I said to Brother Comissiong, it bridges the chasm. There is a wide chasm, there's a wide divide between what is happening in our history and what has happened already. So I want to thank you, and most of all, I want to give thanks to those who has gone before us, our ancestors. Thanks is given. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother David Guru McLean. Brothers and sisters, permit me to read the first page of the story of the book. And I quote, "Our story begins with a scene in a room in a small house in Addis Ababa, the capital city of the African Kingdom of Ethiopia. It is September 1935. And lying on his deathbed in the room is a 58-year-old black Barbadian man by the name of Arnold Josiah Ford. Also in that room is Arnold's much younger Barbadian wife, Mignon Innes Ford, and their 2 newly born Ethiopian children, Yosef and Abi. Arnold Josiah Ford is the most important leader of the West Indian and African American community in Ethiopia. In fact, he is the leader of a project to establish an agricultural settlement of repatriated black Jews of the diaspora on several hundred acres of land provided by Emperor Haile Selassie. But as a result of extreme stress and overwork to the point of the destruction of his health, Arnold's life is slipping away. And the last mission he seeks to perform is to extract from his young wife a solemn pledge that, come what may, she would never leave or abandon Ethiopia. You see, in September 1935, Ethiopia, the one African kingdom that had never been conquered or colonized, was facing a moment of extreme existential crisis. The brutal fascist Italian dictator Benito Mussolini had made clear his evil intention to invade, conquer, and colonize Ethiopia, and had started the process by amassing a formidable array of military forces in the territories bordering Ethiopia. And so, what promised to be a genocidal military invasion was imminent, leading most of the fearful African American and Caribbean migrants in Ethiopia to flee the country in haste. But who exactly, you may ask, was this dutiful, Ethiopia-loving Bajan man? And what had led him to journey so many thousands of miles from his Caribbean island home to meet his maker in this legendary ancient African kingdom? End of quote. That is the first page of the book. That is the scenario that the book begins with. That is the fundamental question posed on page 1 of the book. And the following 96 pages set out to answer that question. I will speak a little more about it later on, but at this point in time, I want to tell you that I have partnered with a Barbadian company by the name of Chattel House Books. It's a company that runs bookstores in Barbados, online as well as physical, promotes Barbadian authors, promotes Barbadian writing, and this is the company that I want to work with in marketing this book, in marketing it not only in Barbados, but across the Caribbean and across the globe. We have all kinds of plans for this book, but I will ask our sister, the director, the chief executive officer of Chattel House Books, Mrs. Beverly Hinkson, to come to the microphone and give you some insight into our plans for the Pan-African love story. Beverly?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Good morning as well for those who are in other parts of the world. First, let me congratulate Ambassador David Comissiong for writing this wonderful book. And thank you, David, for partnering with Chattel House Books to do the distribution of the book. But I'm going to ask you to indulge me one moment, because when David approached us to distribute the book, we were very happy to. We thought this book was an integral part of the Pan-African history. It was reading that should be through all of the schools, whether in Barbados or internationally, as well as to anybody who is interested in the contribution of Barbadian persons to or what we would call the distant shores. But I got really, really excited when I started to read the book and realized that my family actually had what in Barbados we would call a little history with Arnold Josiah Ford's family. And that history saw my family come into possession of one of the working manuscripts for that modern Ethiopian anthem, and the return of that work to Arnold's family some years later. Just to give a little background, I grew up in a household hearing about this lady called Miss Jane Ford. And Miss Jane Ford was a very good friend of my great aunt who had raised my mother, and she was apparently not only just a good friend, she was a neighbor. Through that relationship, my mother actually became friends with Arnold Josiah's children from his first marriage, Arlene and Enid. And again, as I was growing up, I was introduced to both Arlene and Enid, and my mother remained great friends with Arlene until Arlene's death. So we were very aware of this Miss Jane Ford. And this Miss Jane Ford turned out to be Arnold Josiah Ford's sister. Now, when Miss Ford passed away, all of her music books were given to my mother. And among the music books was this manuscript from Arnold Josiah Ford's works for that modern Ethiopian anthem. And in 2007, when Minnie came to Barbados, she visited my mother to talk about, her family, her Barbadian part of the family. And my mother said, but I have this music here. And she in fact gave it to Minnie. So it has been returned to Arnold's family. And I thought that was really great to see that there is that history there. And my mother, who is 86 years old, is still very much able to talk about that story and even give a little history about Arnold's father and who he was and so on. A lot of the research that David would have done. And I have been coaxing David and saying how we need a prequel now to this. We need to know about the Barbadian end of it, simply because that when these books are written, they also showcase the history and the social history of a country. So David, congratulations on what you've done. This is a very wonderful piece of our history, not history only for Barbados, but for Pan-Africanists, for Black people around the world. So congratulations on that. Okay, so now I have diverged a little bit and come back. My job basically is to tell you how you're going to be able to get this book. So locally, we already have these books distributed in bookstores. For those persons locally, the University Bookshop, Cloister Bookstore, Days Books, the Barbados Museum, Book Source, and of course Chattel House Books. For those in the international market who are, I'm sure, very anxious to get hold of these books, we are going to be starting to get the books out to the international market shortly. We're going to make sure that you can purchase them online, and this is going to be through both Chattel House Books and through the online stores all over the world. In addition, we are going to try to work with the brick and mortar stores, particularly the areas where we have a large Caribbean diaspora, to make sure that this book reaches them in those markets. The persons would have asked, what about the ebook? because yes, the print book is available, and that print book will be available, as I said, through the brick and mortar stores, and through online purchasing. So you can purchase the print book on the online stores. But the e-book, we will be working with David to ensure that the e-book format is also available on all of the local and international platforms. So that will be coming shortly. And in the meantime, I would say to the persons in the international market, if you drop us a line at publisher@chattelhousebooks.biz, publisher@chattelhousebooks.biz, we would be happy to point you in the direction of a supplier of this title, or we will ship it ourselves to you. So have no fear. We're going to make sure that this publication reaches as wide an audience as possible, because it is worthy. It is worthy. So I'm going to encourage all of you watching this live stream to purchase a copy of the book. It is something you need to know about. And to the persons here in Barbados, if you are not reading it, you're missing a part of your history. So I would like once more, on behalf of all of us, and all Barbadians everywhere, to say, David, congrats, thank you, and we are happy to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beverly. That's how we have to do it. We have to build our own enterprise. Yeah, they have this, the Americans have this Amazon and whatever else, but we have our Chattel House books. We must work and build each other up. Brothers and sisters, I read that first page, and you would have heard that Arnold was on his deathbed. He was dying. And the final thing that he did was to get that pledge from his 30-year-old wife, Mignon. Mignon made that sacred pledge to him. Come what may, Mussolini could invade, I am not leaving. Now Mignon, this young woman from Wakefield Tenantry in St. John, Barbados, 30 years old. She's had 2 children for Arnold, Joseph and Abby, mere infants. Joseph was probably about 2 years old at the time, Abby a few months old. 2 weeks after Arnold dies, Mussolini's armies invade Ethiopia. This Barbadian woman, not only does she not leave Ethiopia, but this Barbadian woman, after the Italians conquer Ethiopia and occupy it and impose a violent, racist oppression and genocide on Ethiopia, this Bajan woman becomes an Ethiopian resistance fighter, in the sense that she opens her home to the young Ethiopians who are resisting the Italian invasion. She provides a refuge for them. She helps them with English translations. In fact, she even teaches them the English language. Several times she is arrested by the Italian fascists. Several times she is beaten. Several times she is incarcerated. The Italian occupation lasts for 5 years. Tens of thousands of Ethiopians are slaughtered. In fact, after the Ethiopians attempted to assassinate the leader of the Italian forces in Addis Ababa, he decrees a 3-day slaughter of Ethiopians in Addis Ababa. In other words, he gave license to the Italians that for the next 3 days you have the right, without any legal consequences, to kill as many Ethiopians as you like. 30,000 Ethiopians were slaughtered in that 3-day period. By the grace of God, Mignon survives. Many of her friends do not survive. She, for the rest of her life, she has to carry the pain of many of her friends and colleagues who were executed by the Italian fascists. But she survives. And after Emperor Selassie returns and resumes the government of Ethiopia, he sends out a call. Ethiopia has been demolished by 5 years of fascist occupation. We have to rebuild the country. And she immediately responds to the emperor's call. And she is an educator. In fact, one of the reasons she came to Ethiopia was, yes, her love for Arnold, but in addition to that love for Arnold, she was a dedicated Pan-Africanist. And she had decided that she was going to Ethiopia to share her skills as an educator with the Ethiopian people. And so she starts this little school in her little house. She doesn't have any books. She has to make slates for the children. She has to go and get some lime and fashion it into something like chalk. She said we had no textbooks. The textbooks were in our heads. We taught the children from the textbooks in our heads. But from those humble beginnings, she establishes a school that is so dynamic. She introduces the modern educational curriculum to Ethiopia. She establishes the first co-educational school in the entire history of Ethiopia. And her school is so dynamic and so impressive that no less a person than the emperor himself, the emperor's favorite daughter, Princess Zenebi Walk, she died tragically at the age of 16. The emperor was so impressed with Miss Ford's school that he approached her and asked her to do him the favor of renaming her school in honor of Princess Zenebi Walk. And so said, so done. The school, the Princess Zenebi Walk School, popularly known in Ethiopia as PZW School, went on to become a phenomenal educational institution in Ethiopia. Taking education to new heights, breaking down gender barriers, bringing education and schooling to females, to women in Ethiopia. And many of the school's graduates went on to attain very high and responsible positions in Ethiopia. In other words, this Barbadian woman played a critical role in developing modern Ethiopia. So this is the story that we are talking about. We are talking about two world historical personalities. Mignon, who came from Wakefield tenantry in the parish of St. John. Arnold, born in Bridgetown, but grew up in the parish of St. Joseph. Both of them history makers. You cannot talk about the black classical music of America, about jazz, about spirituals, about black concert music, without factoring in the contribution of Arnold Ford, the master musician who went to Harlem in 1910, became the musical director of the New Amsterdam Musical Association, one of the critical institutions in the development of of the classical music of Black America. He joined up with James Reese Europe. Between 1912 and 1915, their orchestra, the Clef Club Orchestra, was featured in several groundbreaking, precedent-setting concerts at the famous Carnegie Hall. Remember, this is in the age of segregation, of Jim Crow. James Reese Europe puts together a black orchestra of 125 musicians, including Arnold Josiah Ford, who is the musical director of the New Amsterdam Musical Association. And here's how James Reese Europe explains what men like himself and Ford were doing in the field of music. And I quote from the book, "We have developed a kind of symphonic music that, no matter what else you think, is different and distinctive, and that lends itself to the plane of the peculiar compositions of our race. My success has come from a realization of the advantages of sticking to the music of my own people. We colored people have our own music that is part of us. It is the product of our souls. It's been created by the sufferings and miseries of our race." End of quote. This was the early development and coming of age of the African Americans' classical music, spirituals, and jazz. And needless to say, the presence and input of our Barbadian musical hero, Arnold Josiah Ford, is to be found in these historic developments. In light of this, the Barbadian musician Arnold Josiah Ford has to be considered one of the legends and heroes of black music and one of the architects of the Harlem Renaissance. Arnold Josiah Ford. That is what this book is about. That is what this book is about. This man goes on. I mean, it is history after history after history. He goes on to lead, along with Bishop Wentworth Matthew, the Black Jewish movement. He goes on in the UNIA. He joins up with Marcus Garvey as early as 1916 or 1917, at the very beginnings of Garvey's career in the United States. In fact, it is said that he was second only to Marcus Garvey as the public face of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Not only was he the musical director, writing the music, conducting the bands, leading the marching bands, but he also organized the paramilitary bodies within the UNIA. Remember, he had 10 years in the British Navy, so he also had a military background. He produced the regulations for the paramilitary bodies. When the US government went after Garvey, he stood firm with Marcus Garvey, supporting his leader. And then, after the Garvey movement goes into some decline, he accepts this invitation from the Ethiopians. They ask him to come to Ethiopia to help with the development of the falashas in the black Jews in Ethiopia. And he undertakes this mission. And all across the world today, wherever you find the Rastafarian movement, there's a song that they sing, an anthem that they sing. Ethiopia, thou land of our fathers, thou land where our gods love to be, as the swift beta hive sudden gathers, thy children all gather to thee, with our red, gold, and green floating o'er us, with our emperor to shield us from wrong, with our God and our future before us. We hail thee with shout and with song. God bless our Negus Negusti and keep Ethiopia free. To advance with truth and right, to advance with love and light, with righteousness leading, we haste to the call. Humanity's pleading, one God for us all. That song is sung all over the world today. Wherever you find gatherings of the Rastafarian faith or meetings of the Ethiopian World Federation, they consider it their anthem. Many people think it is an Ethiopian song composed by an Ethiopian, or it is a song composed by a Jamaican. No, it is a song composed by Arnold Josiah Ford of the parish of St. Joseph right here in Barbados. Arnold Josiah Ford, Marcus Garvey had the vision of the Back to Africa movement, taking blacks from this part of the world and repatriating to Africa. Unfortunately, he was not able to realize that vision. Arnold Josiah Ford realized it. Arnold Josiah Ford, even though because of the Italian invasion, it did not last very long, but he realized it. He led the way, and he brought to Ethiopia over 100 blacks from the diaspora to build the agricultural settlement that he was building in Ethiopia. And just as the wicked US government had targeted the Garvey movement and undermined it, they did a similar thing with Arnold Josiah Ford in Ethiopia. Just the same way they targeted the UNIA, and they came with this trumped-up charge against Marcus Garvey and did everything possible to pull down the Garvey movement in the United States. They did a similar thing to Arnold and his work in Ethiopia. And that is why there was so much stress on the man. He was giving his all. So that is why he died at the age of 58. He had taken so much upon his shoulders. So, brothers and sisters, I don't want to go on any longer. It is all, I really can't do justice this evening. I can't tell you all that is in this book, but suffice it to say, in these 97 pages, we are weaving a story from 1877 Barbados, 39 years after the abolition of slavery, 1 year after the so-called Confederation Rebellion. And we are weaving that story through Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance, black music, the black Jewish movement in the United States, Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, the coronation of Selassie. You actually, in this book, you get a description of the coronation ceremony of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, the occupation of Ethiopia, the fight back by the Ethiopians, the program to rebuild Ethiopia, the plot against Emperor Haile Selassie, the military coup that overthrows Emperor Selassie in the 1970s, Mignon returning to Barbados. She returns home. Selassie visiting Barbados in 1966, his meeting with Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, his address to the House of Assembly in Barbados, Errol Barrow's statement to Selassie in 1966. We go on, the rest, after Selassie's, the death of Selassie in Ethiopia, the downfall of the Derg, that terrible regime that had brought down Selassie, and the restoration of Ethiopia. She goes back, she's an old lady. When she dies, her two children, those two little boys, go on to become professors at Howard University. She is buried in Ethiopia. I will just end by giving you the epitaph on her tombstone, the inscription. After they buried her in Ethiopia, this is what they put on the grave. O Ethiopia, to thee she was called by duty. With thee she toiled for liberty. With thine she cast her destiny. In thee she rests with dignity. These are two of the greatest Barbadian, Caribbean, and Pan-African heroes of them all. And it is a shame that we don't know more about Arnold, Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, and Mignon Lorraine Innes Ford. Many years ago when I met their son, that same little boy, Abi, in 1935, who was in that room when Mignon made that solemn pledge. Many years later, I met Abi when he was a retired professor, and I promised him that I would write this story for our people, especially for our people here in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, Abi passed in 2018 before I was able to produce this story. But I'm so pleased that I have been able to complete it. Abi actually helped me by giving me material. So there's some material in this book that is not readily available to many scholars because it really comes directly from Arnold and Mignon's son, Abi. So I have been collecting material over the years. And last year, 2020, when we had a lockdown in Barbados, and we were confined to our homes, it gave me the opportunity to sit and write this book. And so this is my contribution to our people. I've written it for our people. It gives us important signposts of who we are and what is important in our history and heritage. It is my gift to our people. I hope that it is accepted, it is widely read, and that we get the full value of the lives of these two great Barbadian, Caribbean, African heroes. That's what I have to say. I just want to end now by inviting, once again, to take us out. We began with music. We began with perhaps the composition that many of us regard as the single most important musical composition in our history. And we will go out with one song, one original song from Cali and Najuma.
And blessed in their names, everybody. Give thanks for life, give thanks for life, give thanks for being here. Give thanks to Sister Hainson, David, Sister Mignon, from the media, all the ones here in Arnold Street. We give thanks to our ancestors. Yeah, so this is a song on the national producer.
He will be there.
but you want to make it just move. Come together, we can all be back together, we realize one. Until we are stressed and people say that never can make so forward. Never street, I'm proud of the enemy. Try to let me see my people living in the song. I will never stop until the fortune. Tell me why I'm alone, free around each other for the early morning. Since every day of my life is instead of what to live now. Yo, I said I'm talking to you must get mine. Don't judge me every day, but the rest of it, I'm not apologizing, I will love my mercy. Everything, but I never stop time. It's a bloody sin, I don't know it. Something can carry me down. My name is Apple, I'm a father. I get this away from the one side and money still ancient energies, freestyling powerful symmetries, rebuilding ancient melodies, and one start going to come out to them over and say, isolation you, come from a good day, I am not ready, I've been reached by a city, I say, oh, and then I see, oh, yeah. Coming in your say all around roses, but the jewels are full, so they must start. It's the forest, whatever. So you can't believe. That's it, everyone.